Red Dead Redemption 2, originally released in 2018 on PS4 and Xbox One, but in 2019 for Windows and Stadia, and is the third entry in the Red Dead series, developed by Rockstar Games. I never got around to playing this entry because, well, I was never interested in a continuation, or in this case, a prequel of Red Dead Redemption, despite greatly enjoying that one. But now this entry is constantly lauded as one of the best games, or at least one of the best games visually, because I swear people just use this to brag about graphics and nothing else. So that's what else the game got, aside from graphics. I know one thing it doesn't got: a PS5 upgrade. Our main premise is that we control Arthur Morgan, who's a member of the Venom gang that is led by Dutch. And after a heist gone wrong, they try to hide away in order to decrease the attention on them, but while hiding away, end up coming across the O'Driscoll gang, which, after a fight, now has them on their backs too, but they also overhear the gang's plans to rob a train, and decide why not do it themselves instead, which ended up being a train owned by Cornwall, who then hires the Pinkerton detective agency, now putting the Venom gang in probably way more trouble than they were when they started. Dutch's grand plan for the gang is to have enough money to where they can just retire elsewhere. With enough money, they can just completely leave the country, go somewhere else, and don't have to worry about any sort of robbing, murdering, anything that they've been doing, especially since Dutch isn't exactly fond of the direction America's been going. Not helping the fact that the Pinkerton detective agency does do some dastardly stuff in their attempts in order to try and get the Venom gang. Despite how much happens right in the start, this game's introduction is very slow. Like, the opening prologue takes quite a bit to get started, and for me, I didn't really get invested anything in the story until around chapter 3 or so, where the gang ends up meeting the Greys and Braithwaites, respectively, which ends up going to more interesting direction of Dutch planning to essentially help these two opposing sides, so that way the gang can reap the benefits once they decide to betray both. Despite how large the Venom gang is, and the fact you do get to interact with them constantly in the camp, but since you're also doing missions with them, and can even just do some fun activities also with them, like fishing, I just never found myself really caring much for the Venom gang. The only members I actually really cared about were Arthur himself, Dutch, and Charles. That's about it. I want to say John's obligation, but I feel like John really shined more in the epilogue for this game rather than the actual main campaign itself, but here we got the whole entire first game. Don't be selfish here, John. I do like, even when the gang starts arguing with each other, you're already able to see where each aspect of the argument is coming from, and exactly what kind of things are on their mind. Like, the way the characters act, especially later on, can make it seem that some of them are being completely unreasonable or insane, but if you think about what kind of things they've been through the entire game and their mindset, it does start to add up why they act that way, even if other members of the gang don't exactly agree what's going on. You start to believe that everything's falling apart and that there's no fixing it. I also find it interesting how there are some missions in the game you can just flat out just reject and never participate in, which is just an interesting idea. Granted, there's not many missions like that where you can just flat out just deny them, and the missions you're denying are very optional, as in they don't really add anything or you don't really lose anything in a narrative for doing that. It's just an interesting choice that Arthur just has a choice to tell certain people he's not interested. You also have the returning honor mechanic in this game, with it now also affecting how Arthur talks to people. And it's not, I want to say, a big change, but it's also the fact that there are some scenes late in the game that do have variance depending on how high or low your honor is. It's just interesting to try to add a bit more to the mechanic to alter how Arthur talks to people. There's also the infamous Chapter 5 that I remember even when this game was new, people would say they dropped the game over over it, but I thought it was fine, and especially how it furthered Arthur and Dutch's characters in that section. It's also surprisingly short and everything, or at least way shorter than Red Dead Redemption 1's detour, and also does get complaints for being a detour for the main plot. But at least it feels like more of a detour where the characters still acknowledge the events of it. Overall, when it comes to main story Red Dead Redemption 2, I either found it okay or just boring at point. Especially the opening until chapter 3 just felt the most dull. It was the fact that the Venom gang is so big with so many members, but only few of them I actually like and whose stories I actually want to follow. So most of them are a case of I don't even know your name and I don't care to. And that's not what the game's trying, because there weren't many moments when the characters walk up to Arthur and talk to him, and you also can't shoot them away, but I didn't. Just want to see what they have to say to him. Was the fact that this vast majority of the Venom gang I just don't really care for, and the people we're going up against when it comes to the Driscolls or the Pinkertons just don't really find as interesting as antagonists at all. Like, the Pinkertons probably I put the highest point when it comes to antagonists for this game, but the O'Driscolls were such a footnote to me that I kept forgetting they were even in the game. There is an epilogue portion of this game. It's a very sizable epilogue to this game. I did end up enjoying more, probably because it was smaller scale and more of the drama of the group going on when it came to epilogue, rather than need to have these so many moving parts of, oh, here's the Pinkertons, here's the O'Driscoll, here's this gang now messing with the Venom gang, and stuff like that going on. So I had less people to focus on, but it also meant it could also do more with them, where I feel like the vast majority of the Venom gang in the main story don't really have much to add, so it just becomes the main cowboys of the group and everything. And even then, I still just narrow it down to Arthur, Dutch, John, and also Micah there, but I also just don't care for Micah. I will say I feel like Dutch and Abigail, John's wife, do get a lot of unnecessary hate from the players I've seen, especially if you think about things from their perspectives. What I like about the game's writing shows the characters acting unreasonable in one perspective, but if you see things from their point of view, you can see why they're acting the way they do and go, okay, I can understand why they're like this. Now it's time for the gameplay, being a card-based third-person shooter, with the big change to this game being how the open world functions, which is the fact that when they have a bounty, you can also now have bounty hunters after you as well, and they add a witness system where if someone sees Arthur Morgan committing a crime, you then have to either chase them down or to prevent it from being reported, or just let them report it and then have the law start coming after you. People complain about the witness system being way too strict. I actually like the witness system because it truly feels like this bandit who needs to leave no trace and he's gonna constantly chase down the witness in order to stop them from talking. So I do like that aspect, and especially the bounty hunters, because in the open world, there's just several people who can now just try and create traps for Arthur, whether it be bounty hunters, the Pinkertons, other enemy gangs, everything going on. It's just probably the best aspect for me about this game are just the ambushes and the way they try to stop Arthur, or the fact that there are points where they can ambush you close to the Venom gang's base, and the game warns you not to lead them back to the group, so you have to take them on there and then, or just completely run in a different direction. And that's a cool way of using the open world for these ambushes and trying to get the player to either deal with them then and there, or get the hell out of there, but just don't run towards the base. There are also the returning stranger missions in the first game, but this time the mechanic has changed to where there's a lot more going on with the stranger side missions. They have multiple parts towards their stories now, which means they keep increasing, keep seeing them over and over, which I feel is for the better because they do match like the strangers more interesting this time around because of the fact they now have their own full story arcs. It's like in the first game, they are actually treated as the same quality as a proper main storyline quest. So they have the same attention, everything going on in cutscenes, and when it comes to how Arthur interacts with them in the story for their quests, which is a very cool aspect when it comes to strangers, and just how much they can keep going, seeing how much more absurd some of these people can get with the request they have of Arthur Morgan. You also put customization option when it comes to Arthur's appearance, whether it be the fact that his hair keeps growing as time passes on, so you can get it trimmed, get a different haircut, get a different style for the facial hair, or just buy many outfits, since the game's weather does take into account what kind of clothing Arthur is wearing as well. So there's a little tension when it comes to that, or to add more reasons to explore the open world, find the tailors, find the barbers, and stuff like that. You also now have the ability to track animals, which allows you to see the line of where they've been in order to help with hunting. And now you also have the aspect of the quality of the pelts and stuff you get, depending on how you took out the animal in question, adding a bit more to how hunting functions compared to the first game, and does make hunting more enjoyable, especially since you always have the bow on your horse or they go and come reclaim, so that way you're always hunting ready. That's all the positives that changes to the gameplay, because it's all downhill here, starting with the missions themselves being way more linear and strict, to the point where you're just following exactly what the game wants you to do, to an obnoxious degree where, despite the fact that in this game, the Venom gang are pulling off these grand heists, grand things that are way bigger than anything you did in the first game, but it never feels like that because the game just keeps things as simple as possible and you must follow it exactly to the T. I've seen some exaggerate that if you go slightly off a beaten path, the game fails you. It does sometimes do that, but not really as much as people say. Hell, I had some times where the game failed me the moment the mission started.
Show you a couple of my tricks. There's a spot.
It is so weird to have this big, massive open world, everyone has this freedom what the player can do, but then in the actual missions themselves, there's just so little control the player is allowed to do and to follow exactly what the game wants you to do, to a point where it never really feels like you're doing these big heists. Hell, even during heist segments that should be the big moments, they'll occasionally have Arthur probably do the most boring parts of the heist. Everything is one of those things that's like, this is just way less interesting in what's going on compared to the first game's gameplay. Like, the best way to put it is that the first game was more about arcade shooter. Here is more about incredibly slow-paced realism, but the realism they're putting in isn't the fun kind of realism. You also have other changes, like the fact that Arthur cannot carry his long rifles on him on his person. Instead, it is always with your horse, which every single time you have to remember to get your long rifles from the horse, and I don't understand why they made that change to where Arthur can just have all his weapons on him. They do allow him to now dual wield his one-handed guns, which is an appreciated little aspect, but just the fact that it just adds another restriction to him for no real reason. While I will say that Arthur himself on foot controls better than John did in the first game, the horse feels way worse, mostly because it just feels way slower and the stamina drains faster because of the method they want you to do in order to actually sprint, but it's more rhythmic based as opposed to a more simple way in the first game. Ironically, it's more requirement. So now it's wasting more stamina, and this doesn't really go as far. I'm complaining about this because the open world is infinitely bigger than the first game, which was already too big for its own good, and now it's even bigger here, and there's just so much dead space and not much going on. There's only a certain amount of events that can happen to really add variety, but once those out, you're just back to doing the same thing of, oh, I see someone getting carried away by bounty hunters, they're screaming for help, oh, this person on the carrier is being chased, and stuff like that. Just, you know, interest. Only one time where I saw an event that wasn't even I could participate, it was just the aftermath of a wagon group being attacked by these gang, and I was just stunned, like, what the hell happened to them? And I never found out the story. What the hell happened to them? Not help the fast travel system has been reduced greatly. Only be able to fast travel at certain locales. And you can only fast travel specifically to named towns. You cannot fast travel to any waypoint that you mark. It's no longer that lenient. It is only specifically to any town. So you still have to ride your horse out to certain places, or if there's no town nearby, well then, get screwed whatsoever when it comes to going there. And you can upgrade the Venom gang's base and also get a fast travel board for Arthur at the base as well. But once again, he can still only fast travel to certain towns. I've seen people say you can go to camp and then fast travel, but I thought they meant camp as in making a campfire like the first game. No, people meant the camp as in the main camp you have for the gang, and I'm not gonna go back to base just to fast travel every time, especially when it's still as restrictive of, nope, go to fast travel to certain towns, and this game is way bigger, and we reduce your quick way of transportation for some reason. So most of the gamers on horseback, alright, we're a cowboy, that should be fine. But they decided to add more realism into how the horse functions, where the horse will easily fall over from stuff, whether it be the fact that we have accidentally driven the horse into an object, other person driven their wagon in front of you, hey asshole, I'm moving over here, or the fact that sometimes it will just fall over anyway. We gotta wait for it to get back up. Sometimes it may be throwing a tangent, we gotta calm it down, but just the fact that the horse just doesn't feel as good to use because they're not as fast, and now they're also not as reliable. And also, I swear in this game, the enemies are more prone to aiming towards their horse, which for actual combat, that's pretty cool. But when it comes to the fact that I now have no horse that's in the middle of nowhere, that means time for Arthur to freaking walk through this giant map. I had points where I have a horse and everything, and the game would have me whistle, and the game would say, sorry, your horse can't hear you. It's like, what do you mean? I am in the town with my horse, and now I'm suddenly unable to call my horse. Hell, I'm barely outside the town, and you're telling me my horse can't show up? And this game has both your main horse and a temporary horse that can also show up. And you're telling me both of them can't hear Arthur whistling? Even when I get into the last spot where I had my horse, the game still tells me, nope, it can't hear Arthur. One of the aspects of having low honor is the fact that you get greater loot from corpses. But with how restrictive the main missions are, you'll find moments when the game either won't let you loot the enemy, or your NPCs will scold you for taking the time to loot enemies, or the game will have the NPCs just flat out die because everyone besides Arthur Morgan, I swear, is an incompetent gunslinger, so you can't take the 2 seconds in order to loot a body to get the benefits of being low honor during a mission. I also question how one can be honorable when their main occupation is being an outlaw that steals and robs from the innocent, and no, I don't care if Dutch's logic of we're robbing high society and the government, stuff like that. We are still shooting at the lawmen. We're still shooting down civilians who get in our way. I really don't know how that honor bar can even remain high. Speaking of which, it feels harder to lower honor than it is to gain it. I have gone entire freaking sprees in towns over small misunderstandings, and it still feels like the honor bar doesn't go that low. But if I dare to help a stranger in their one small ordeal, well, now that honor bar has gone way higher, so I swear it's harder to become a dishonorable bandit than it is to become an honorable one. There are certain heist missions in the game where you will get a bounty for doing them, since you are committing a big crime in the middle of the spree, which is, alright, sure, makes sense. My issue then becomes the fact that even if you go to a mission wearing a mask, the story will have everyone remove their masks anyway. Hell, there are missions where they start the mission wearing their mask and they'll take it off mid-mission anyway. I mean, it'll take it off, the cutscenes just won't show it, and to keep continuity, the cutscene will then just have the characters not wearing their masks, and then, oh, now they know it's Arthur Morgan. Hell, sometimes even with the mask, they'll still know the criminal in question is Arthur Morgan. Hell, I've had incidents where the police just decide to freaking jump and arrest Arthur for the most minor of things. I didn't even do anything, and they're like, hold it right there, put your hands up, and guns down, or we will shoot, and it's like, what did I even do? Another weird quirk to the gameplay is the fact of how often the game will just unequip your weapon. Like, you're able to just tap the button in order to pull your weapon. In order to do certain activities like climbing or anything like that, the game for some reason has Arthur automatically put the weapon away. Or there could be certain aspects where your aim button is also used to interact with people, but it means there are some times where even during a gunfight, the aim button will just have Arthur look at someone, not pull out his weapon, then you gotta press the shoot button in order to pull out the weapon, and they can start shooting. In a game where enemies can fill Arthur with holes pretty fast, this 1 extra second does actually mean a lot if you're currently not undercover. That's on top of making sure, once again, that you didn't leave your long rifles in the horse's satchel and everything. And if your horse goes down, well then there goes the satchel with it, unless you go to a new stable and everything. And by God, does this game love killing off my horse. That horse has died probably 4 to 5 times in the whole entire campaign. I do not care for the horse in the game in the slightest already because of the controls, but I care even less where it keeps rotating. Hell, one of those deaths wasn't even a death. The game flat out just deleted my horse. And when it comes to the Deadeye mechanic, they don't really change much with or add anything new, so still a great mechanic, but what they really do to try to add more to it is the fact that, oh, now there are parts of the enemy's body that glow to highlight a fatal spot, which on a human being is like, whatever, like, oh, shoot an enemy in the torso or in the face or in the heart, thanks. But on animals, that becomes more useful for your hunts, since it means now know the certain spot to try and get better quality pelts and everything, so you now know the exact parts to try and get the most out of your hunts. There are also moments where the game's scripting is so blatantly obvious. Like, there are points of opportunity to do something early, but if you do it, the enemy just takes 0 damage no matter how many bullets you put into them. Or there is one point in the epilogue section where they flat out disable your Deadeye because, oh sorry, what happened to this whole cinematic moment, so we can't let the player actually do something in this segment, so let's disable Deadeye so that way you can just immediately kill the opponent. Oh, and also shooting them means nothing because they're now temporarily immortal, just for this segment, because like I said, we're trying to do something, so how dare you try and play the game. Now for the game's text, with the subtitles having a black window on them, making them easier to read everything going on, and the font this time around is way easier to read, and I do like the subtitle font everything. The only big issues I have when it comes to text and UI is mostly when it comes to the top left corner that gives you important information, because that thing is beyond tiny for no real reason, everything going on. And the cores, when it comes to Arthur's stats, that's his horse, are initially small. You can technically make them bigger by making the compass bigger, but it's still just weird how small they are initially when it comes out, so it is a weird aspect when it comes to that. It's also the fact that when it comes to the stores in the game, they show you all the stuff based on, oh, realistically, here's the catalog, everything, which is like, great. I'd rather it just be more like a menu thing at the first game, rather than this little catalog pamphlet. They do pop up the text, the information of what it does, but it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, don't really need this catalog kind of thing going on, especially for clothing. That's more necessary, makes it harder to see what Arthur's actually buying. But when it comes to text, the fact that the top left corner text, which gives you hints and aspects that tells you important information, is the smallest thing on the screen. There is other stuff like general little control aspects that are on the bottom right, but their size and the fact that they have a black outline on them makes them stand out from the environment, especially since they're white. Even from the get-go, when you're in the snowy area, they still stand out and are visible, so I do like that aspect when it comes to the text. I do find it weird that the speaker name color is gray or there's a black background. It does manage to stand out enough, but it's still a weird color to use in order to indicate a name when you're already using the black background for the subtitles. Overall, because I feel that Red Dead Redemption 2, I just found the game mostly boring for the most part. Like, I don't care for most of the narrative stuff going on. And even when it gets to the point that's the most divisive point of the game that people hated, I thought it was actually fine and went pretty smoothly. At least more smoothly compared to when the first game tried to do something similar. I like Arthur, I like Dutch, but just the vast majority of the Van gang just uninteresting. I can see some aspects where Dutch is coming from. I can see some aspects where Abigail's coming from when there are segments that people complain about her specifically. The stranger side quests are better than ever here, and it's interesting how there are some quests you just flat out just refuse, even when it comes to main characters in the Van gang entirely. It's cool that you get to have bonding moments with the gang if you do enjoy them, and you just do some activities, like one of just repeatedly is just like, hey, wanna go hunting with Bill? Or hey, wanna go fishing with Javier? And stuff like that, but I just don't really find them interesting, so I'm gonna go with my pal Hamish and not with y'all. The ambush mechanic kept the open world more fresh than anything else the game tried to do, which also meant I was pretty much incentivized to just constantly have a bounty on Arthur in certain locales and just screw all the consequences, because one consequence was actually the most enjoyment I got out of the game. People love to claim it's more realistic, which it isn't. It's supposed to have to cut corners for realism. That's not realistic, but the realism they do add is generally the most boring ways. Like, oh, Arthur has to pick up each item one by one, has to search each drawer slowly. The looting is now a slower animation. Arthur is now weirdly dedicated to actions, which is actually not realistic at all, and I almost got run over by a train. My horse got run over because Arthur just refused to move and stop canceling animation, but for some reason, realism though. Gotta clean up the guns, which I actually do like. I have to clean up the guns. It also advises you also go into a store to get new ones, so I do like that aspect when it comes to that. But just the fact that it's like, so much of the quote-unquote realism is the most boring kind, rather than ones that are actually more enjoyable, is why I don't understand why it's the go-to excuse. Like I say about Red Dead Redemption 2, it's probably an okay game, but this playthrough showed me why people mostly use it just to gush about its visuals and just compare it to other games visually, and never actually bring up the contents of the game itself at all. It's just the example of, here's one of the most prettiest games out there, and that's pretty much it. That's what I say about it. Alrighty then, good day.
That we reestablish sanity and supremacy before it is too late. Our numbers are waning. The black-hearted demons! Goddamn hunted rodents. I'll kill all you bastards.